have gone through the commission. However, having said that, clearly the evaluation found that there's more work to be desired in this area. So one of the things that, several things that we're looking at improving is we're in the process of redoing our annual report about neighborhood organizations. We're expecting a new version of that to be out in September and making a better presentation to that to the council so that the full council understands the work that's going on with neighborhood groups. We also committed to, per the staff directive, with a blueprint for equitable engagement to report back annually to the council. And one of the other things that we're looking at, and I have my apologies to the chair, I haven't spoken to you about this yet, but one of the things we're looking at is being able to highlight neighborhood projects that are going on and bringing the HEC members either to them or having the projects come to the commission or the council in order to highlight some of the good work that neighborhoods are doing. It's really kind of modeled off of our community dialogues format, and actually it's an idea that came from one of our neighborhood reps who is sitting in the audience today, and I think it's a good one to at least explore about really being able to highlight the work of neighborhoods.
And the fifth finding was that there should be a reorganization of the relationship between NCR staff and the commissioners, NCEC commissioners. We did, through our focus group meetings that we held, we realized that the staff, NCR staff, is really overworked. Their mission is nearly impossible to go out and the number was 17
neighborhoods per staff, 16 to 17.
17 neighborhoods per staff, looking at the legal ramifications of the organization, the transparency, the financial issues, governance kinds of issues alone, not to mention the additional kinds of services and support that neighborhood organizations are asking for. The strategic planning, helping us figure out how we get access to city council and to departments. What happens when we run up against a stone wall? How do we begin to collaborate with each other neighborhood organizations working together rather than independently? By the way, I will say that we found that the organizations that appear to be doing best of all in terms of and are most satisfied are those organizations that are collaborating. The organizations that stand alone don't seem to be quite as fulfilled. The organizations that work together tend to have greater budgets. They seem to be more satisfied with the relationship with the city. That doesn't happen by itself. That could be potentiated and catalyzed with input from NCR staff. But with the number of staff and the responsibilities that they have, I don't see how it's possible. So we recommended that there should be at least 5 more NCR staff. And that was based on discussions with the staff themselves and with neighborhood organizations. The commissioners, the role between the commissioners and NCR needs to be clarified. And it was clear to us too that neighborhood organizations are unaware many times of all the services and support that the department provides and are unaware of how to accomplish their goals. They'll have projects that they want to see completed, programs they want to see initiated, and there could be assistance from staff and from the commissioners, I think, as well, working together to help the neighborhood organizations realize their goals. And so they're just in a chart that shows how decisions are made and how you access the various resources would be very, very helpful.
Chair Gordon and committee members, I agree with it. Again, we agree with everything in the findings of the evaluation. Obviously, one of the challenges here is capacity, both for the commissioners and the department, as Mr. Smith was talking about there. The aforementioned reorganization internally within the department, I think, will help. What we're trying to do there is make sure that internally we're working closer and better together to maximize our capacity with neighborhood groups as well as the enterprise. So that is underway. I'm expecting that to be completed by September. I think that will help. We are requesting an additional FTE in our budget in order to have more capacity. And as I mentioned prior to this, that the suggestion of bringing the NCEC and the NRP policy board together provides better clarity for neighborhood groups around the structure. It also reduces staff workload. Managing two commissions that basically do this very similar work, not the same work, but similar work, and moving that into one, there's a certain efficiency that comes from that as well. Happy to make the flow chart. Think that's a good idea, and to be able to visually represent the work and how the work actually flows. I'm going to take a minute, if I could, to talk about just a couple other things that have since come from the evaluation, additional work that as a result of the findings. One is we recently redid our neighborhood assignments based on the input and the feedback and the recommendations from the report. Is that neighborhoods that collaborated together were doing better and were more successful. So our staff assignments prior to this had always been kind of mixed around the city and in different areas, and we've reassigned them to be more geographically centered, where we're neighborhoods within a certain area of the city are having the same staff supports person. Again, the idea behind this is to maximize internal capacity to support the neighborhood organizations and how they function. So we just recently completed that. So each staff person has different regions in the city. So everybody like along, just pick one for like Broadway in North Minneapolis, on both sides of Broadway have the same NCR staff person now, which is different than before. This also gets better to aligning closer to the way the city actually functions and most of the departments in the city, which work in more regional areas. And therefore, I think we're going to be able to enhance our ability to work and connect neighborhood work more directly with city staff because of that alignment, and that they're not working with multiple NCR staff person on the same particular project.
So I would just suggest that if you have a map of that or the assignments in the areas, if all council members could get that, that might be appreciated.
Chair Gordon and committee members, that is actually on our website. We did push that out to the neighborhood organizations on, I believe it was July 1st, if I recall correctly. I don't have it in front of me, but it is out there publicly and it is on our website.
Okay, well, if you feel like pushing it out the same way to council members, they might notice it more.
Yes, we would be happy to do that. Second thing is the community participation program guidelines have incorporated a lot of these recommendations within them. Not here to speak about that quite yet today. That'll be presented at the next HEC committee meeting on July 25th. And then, as I mentioned before, we're now kicking around the notion of having these community dialogues between the HEC committee members and neighborhoods as a way to highlight projects that are going on out into the community and the good work that's going on out there. So with that, if I may, hand it over to Bill for any closing comments.
We generally found that the department, again, just to reiterate, has met all of the requirements and conditions that are outlined in the framework for the future, with some tweaking so that there's recognizing that the framework is a dated document and those requirements are dated, and that we've moved into another era, if you will, of citizen participation. It's appropriate, I think, to do some tweaking along the way, and that includes tweaking within the department itself and with the commissioners. Those are the two big areas that I think need help. Otherwise, for the most part, there were concerns along the way, some strong concerns, in fact, expressed by neighborhood organizations, but generally, neighborhood organizations appear to be satisfied. We did find, and I want to comment too, that this is really difficult work, and many of you on the council know that. You're out organizing your constituents. We got concerns along the way. Well, the evaluation that you're doing isn't reaching people effectively, and so we altered midstream to make sure that we were reaching people more effectively. There was a concern that we didn't reach. We'd reach board members and staff, but we didn't reach the rank and file membership, and so we changed. And so when we made these changes and we extended and we ran additional surveys, we held additional focus group meetings, we often found that people didn't show up and participate after having commented. So it's difficult to run a community engagement program, and I think that the department's doing a very good job.
So that concludes our presentation. We're here to take questions.
Oops, pardon me.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not on this committee, but I did save a couple of my questions from Audit Committee, actually, just to ask in front of you all here at committee, if that's all right.
Yes.
Mr. Smith, can you speak to what had you expected to hear from these focus groups based on the initial layout that perhaps you didn't? What kinds of things did you expect to, what was the kind of conversation you were expecting, or rather, was there anything you didn't hear that you were hoping to or expecting to based on the conversations you'd had previously and in the steering committee?
That's an interesting question, council member. I think we generally heard what the steering committee expected. There were specific incidents that were discussed, though probably more discussion about funding than the steering committee might have anticipated. Additionally, there were concerns about some of the administrative sort of relations between the neighborhood organizations and the department. A big concern was that neighborhood organizations expressed that it was difficult, that there was a lot of time that was taken to get contracts approved, and that there was a lot of time taken to get funding reimbursements. I wasn't expecting to hear that. We really did try to get people to talk more about what their expectations were that went beyond the administrative sort of level. I think administrative things can be fixed, but it's more easily at times than the sort of policy kinds of questions that neighborhood organizations have that they eventually did respond to when we did our focus group meetings.
Thank you. And if I may, one more question. The second is, I'm curious, how do you feel internal audit, and this is for Mr. Ruberdor probably, or Mr. Smith, how can internal audit continue to provide valuable services to your department, sir, or as a result of the findings from this audit? I think we spoke about that a little bit in our initial debriefing of this audit, but I was just curious what your thoughts are.
Chair Gordon and Councilmember Palmisano, the potential of what internal audit can provide in the future, I think, is to continuing to give us an independent review of our work and being able to help us. One of the things I'd like some additional assistance on is ways to measure our work and figuring out how we can better articulate the impact of our work. I will say I enjoyed this process. I enjoyed working with Mr. Tetzel. I think he added a tremendous amount of value to our work in helping to really kind of look at the report, how it would be, the initial drafts that were coming out, how we could move them in a way that would actually be the most impactful for the department, how to put the information in a format that actually led to conclusions and results, and working directly with the evaluator. And also having that kind of, for us, having the internal auditor being the independent review. So, we were getting our feedback and our comments into the office, and then also they were serving as a way to be able to articulate that to the evaluators, to making sure that I didn't want to overly influence the results of this, but because I did want an objective review. But at the same time, helping to frame this up in a way that was useful information for us. So it was a good dynamic relationship. I enjoyed that. I think work in the future to continue that, as Mr. Smith alluded to there, or actually said directly, this is difficult work, and the more we can be on point, and the better we can do our work and be clear about it, the better for everybody. And I think the auditor provides that opportunity to have that kind of review. I would anticipate, depending on, I don't want to commit to the Mr. Tesla's time frame, but every few years to be able to do such an evaluation would be helpful for us.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, Chair Gordon, and I agree. I think that the biggest challenge of this work through the steering committee was developing what was it that we're measuring here, and it took a lot of time to come up with that, and to have those metrics in place for the future, I think, are important. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here and all your work on this. Councilmember Cano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to speak more generally about the work that's been happening, and I just want to say thank you both for taking on this effort, and thank you to Councilmember Lene Palmisano for also leading on this front. And in light of the events that have been happening around the Twin Cities area over the past week or two, and particularly in North Minneapolis with the death of a 2-year-old, the role of NCR is really, I believe we're just kind of scratching the surface of how the city of Minneapolis can truly engage people of color, communities of color, immigrant communities, indigenous communities. And I think we need to do some thinking, some big picture thinking about the future of the department and the types of funding resources that it will need as the growth of the Twin Cities area is being driven by people of color. I think we need to look at national models about how other municipalities are strengthening their internal departments to really be able to welcome, involve, and engage those communities that, as I just mentioned, are driving the growth in cities throughout the nation, and also experiencing some significant challenges when it comes to being served in the proper way and being respected in the proper way, and being allowed to live in our cities. And so, one Latino liaison is not enough. One American Indian liaison is not enough. One African American liaison is not enough. That is an outdated model, and we need to do some serious thinking about what is it that we want to lead with? What is it that we want to lead on when it comes to engaging communities of color? And strategically, how is that investment being returned in a reciprocal manner to ensure that we are leveraging all those relationships, all of those meetings, all of that work that I see Christine McDonald doing, all of that work that I see Mariana Espinosa doing, all of that time that is being spent with the city participating and involving themselves in a lot of conversations and issues and communities that don't end at 4 p.m. I see folks out there on the weekends, and when somebody needs support, they're there, they show up, and it's part of, it's because they're part of that community in a very intimate way. And so how do we strategically use that investment to feed the city's initiatives and programs, such as the comp plan, such as a complete streets framework that's going to be rolled out from now on in the work that our public works department does, in our community policing strategies. And so while I acknowledge that a lot of times the community feels like sometimes government and other institutions are there to exploit the genius that is coming from these communities, we do need to have a conversation moving forward about what does that equitable relationship look like, so that we can see more integration between our governing systems and our community, so that it doesn't feel so divided and it doesn't feel so irrelevant or connected. And so I just want to personally say that, as the council member who represents one of the most diverse areas of the city, I have been very thankful for the work that NCR has done. I don't know what I would do without a lot of the support that you provide when it comes to managing some meetings and doing outreach, whether it's on paid sick or working families, or engaging our communities through multilingual messages and ethnic radio. I think that we definitely need to figure out how to support your department more and figure out how to put some of these recommendations and ideas into action coming from this audit, and also thinking about the future, getting ahead on that futuristic conversation so that we're not stuck responding to situations that are going to be coming our way. More and more are going to be coming our way. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I hope that we can have that discussion soon.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions up here. Certainly appreciate working going through this, and I really appreciate that we did this independent evaluation, and we had the assistance from the auditor's office and outside contractor. So the action before us about this is to receive and file the report. But I guess I have one question. David, there is one question I'm curious about, is because I think there is one person who came here actually wanting to speak on this. and we didn't, this wasn't a time for community comment. And I know that council members are pressed for time too, but is the commission going to be reviewing this and hearing this? Will there be other opportunities for folks to hear and respond and give feedback about this and all the 30-some recommendations that are in it?
Chair Gordon and committee members, this is going to the NCEC, Neighborhood Community Engagement Commission, in this month, I believe. Had to double check with Mr. Blinn there. So it will be presented there. Mr. Smith is coming to present this also to go over the details of the report. We'll probably spend a lot more time kind of digging through the details in there. The public is welcome to attend that event or that meeting, and it is the 26th of July at 5 o'clock at the library this month.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. And there's the fact that we're just receiving and filing it and moving forward with two staff directions doesn't mean there aren't other recommendations in there that the staff and the department can be looking at and neighborhood organizations and implementing. I think there's lots of things to work on and pull out and think about in there. So I really appreciate that. So I'm going to, seeing no other discussion or questions, then I'll move to receive and file the report and also direct our staff to work with the commission and the Neighborhood Revitalization Policy Board to identify options for combining their functions and merging into one commission, and to report back in January of next year, and also direct the staff to work with the coordinator's office and other departments as needed to identify potential funding options for funding neighborhood organizations after the expiration of the consolidated TIF district, and also report back January 31st. And I'll note with that second staff direction, it's going to be really critical that we have the involvement of our neighborhood organizations in that, and the commission in those discussions, and especially evaluating or maybe brainstorming any options, because that's going to be a big decision and a big pathway to find our way on. So on those motions, or that motion in 3 parts, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Then we're to our final surprise item, and I really commend all the people who've waited all this time and sat through this. Mr. Carl, it's been a pleasure having you with us today. Unexpected delight. What's the news on the petition?
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon, members of the committee. My name is Casey Carl. I have the privilege of serving as city clerk for the city of Minneapolis. And as the agenda says, I'm here to report on an amended petition that has been submitted to us by the Committee for Professional Policing related to its proposal to amend the city charter by referring a ballot question to the electorate as part of the 2016 presidential general election, which is scheduled for Tuesday, November 8th. Staff is distributing an updated report on our findings at this current time. There will be additional copies of that printed report available at the dais for members of the public who are in attendance. And as mentioned at the first review of the original petition, we will be posting copies of this after the meeting to the website. Before making my full report, I'd like to express appreciation to you, Mr. Chair, for allowing us to present this report to your committee. Of course, this isn't a subject matter that's within this committee's oversight, but because of statutory timelines which regulate the timing of such petitions, and with leadership from Vice President Glidden, we're here to report on the sufficiency of this particular petition within the timeframes that are set by state law. And for this committee, and as well for the public who have been monitoring closely, I'd like to start by providing some context on the petition and the process that's outlined in state statute for considering petitions to amend home rule charters. The Committee for Professional Policing submitted its original petition to the Charter Commission at a special meeting that was held on June 13th. The petition seeks to amend the city charter to require Minneapolis police officers to carry professional liability insurance throughout their terms of service. The original petition contained 14,602 signatures spread across 1,529 individual pages. And after formally receiving the petition, the Charter Commission transmitted it to the city for validation on June 14. The first review of that original petition found it to be insufficient, as reported to the Intergovernmental Relations Committee at its meeting on June 23rd. And as provided by law, the committee did file an amended petition on July 5th to cure the defects found in the original petition and to gather supplemental signatures to meet the minimum requirements of the state law. Pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota Statutes 410.12, Subdivision 3, a citizen petition to amend a home rule charter must contain the signatures of a number of registered voters equal to at least 5% of the total votes cast in the last general state election. The last statewide general election was the 2014 gubernatorial election, in which a total of 137,362 ballots were cast in the city of Minneapolis. So based on that total, a petition to amend a home rule charter in 2016 must include the signatures of at least 6,869 registered Minneapolis voters to be deemed sufficient. The original petition from the Committee for Professional Policing failed to satisfy the signature requirement by 509 valid signatures, a difference of about 7% from the minimum statutory requirement. The supplemental filings made as part of the amended petition included an additional 174 pages, which contained a total of 1,150 signatures, bringing the total number of signatories to this petition to 15,752. Of that total number, the city already had validated a total of 6,360 signatures on its first review. That left a gap, as I said, of 509 valid signatures required to satisfy the minimum number of signatures for a citizen petition to be deemed sufficient. Based on our review of the supplemental filings submitted by the Committee for Professional Policing, I'm reporting to this committee that staff has validated 694 signatures. Thus, the total number of valid signatures on the amended petition now stands at 7,054. This satisfies the statutory requirement that the petition contain a number of signatures equal to 5% of the ballots cast in the last statewide general election. The report before you includes the full details of staff's analysis of the amended petition, including a copy of the supervisor's log notes, which reflect the day-by-day activities of the processing teams, as well as all major incidents and issues that were raised and addressed as part of our second assessment of the petition. On page 3 of the report is a high-level synopsis of the tabulation of all validated signatures and a summary of any defects that were discovered, both in the original as well as the amended petitions. In respect of the committee's time, I won't review those details. At this point, I'd like to announce again a copy of the full report will be posted to the website as part of this committee's agenda. Mr. Chair, as a consequence of these findings, I am certifying that the amended petition submitted by the Committee for Professional Policing is sufficient and is in compliance with the requirements of an enabling statute, and at this time would be in order to receive and file the report. With that, I've concluded my comments and would be happy to stand for questions.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate the report. I was impressed enough with that high-level summary, so imagine how delighted I was to find each, all the specifics there. Very good. I think the only question that I have or people might be curious about is what are the next steps? I mean, I'll certainly move to receive this, and I'm sure that will pass, and it will go to the council meeting, and then what happens next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next steps in this process are for the City Council to formally then take its action. So on its meeting on Friday, July 22nd, under new business, the City Council will then take up this matter of the full petition, which is deemed sufficient under the statute, and refer it to staff, asking staff to draft appropriate ballot language, bring back recommendations and options to the City Council through its Standing Committee of the Whole. The Standing Committee of the Whole will consider any recommendations or advice from the City Attorney's Office and their staff at its meeting on August 3rd. So the meeting of August 3rd for the Committee of the Whole will be the next time that any actions to come forward at this point would be brought to the committee for its recommendation, and then the City Council would have 2 regular meetings in which to take final action, and that would of course be the first opportunity on August 5th and then August 19th. August 19th is the last regular meeting of the City Council that we have on the calendar before the statutory deadline for submitting ballot questions to the county, which is the following Friday, August 26th. All questions that go to the ballot have to be submitted by me to the county on August 26th. So that gives us 2 full cycles now to get this piece of the work done.
Does the Charter Commission have any role? Will they touch this at all?
Mr. Chair, the Charter Commission receives the petition and they pass it off to the city. It becomes our process at that point. So their official engagement on this is concluded.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. Oh, yes, I do. Councilmember Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I was under the impression, Mr. Clerk, that the Committee of the Whole would take this up on July 20th, but you're saying that won't happen until the 3rd of August?
With apologies, we had originally looked at a calendar that had July 20th being the first time that this would come to committee of the whole, but this matter needs to be taken by the city council at its meeting, which is 2 days later, to refer out to staff. So because this is officially an action by the city council, it needs to make that referral to the committee of the whole and give direction to the staff. The reporting that we've done on the petition process thus far to committees has simply been to meet statutory timelines, and it's really a city clerk reporting function. It hasn't been within the jurisdiction or ownership at this point of the council or any of its standing committees. So as example for today, the vice president suggested that we use the standing meeting of the Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee to make this report so that the public could hear that result. The official action of the city council becomes once the city clerk has certified that petition, which we'll do today, and then it goes to the city council. The city council starts its process. The process of the city council is to refer matters to its standing committees for their further review and recommendations. So that puts us back just 1 week.
Thank you.
Okay, then. With congratulations to the citizens who put forward this effort, I will move to receive and file this report. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion carries then. Thank you very much. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. 2 hours. All right.